Every year we have TVs going up against each other to find out who is the king of TVs. We have the Value Electronics Shootout, we have HDTV Test Shootout, we have other shootouts across the world that are going to be putting all these TVs up against each other. Well, being somebody who compares TVs, I definitely wanted to do my own shootout this year, and that's what I'm doing with these 4 TVs. I do consider them the best TVs you can buy. Most of this comparison will be out of the box in Filmmaker mode, but I will have a section where I'm going to show you the TV in multiple different modes on the same exact demo, just going to switch the mode each time. So that will give you a sense of what the TVs are going to be maybe for you if you're not somebody who watches Filmmaker mode. Okay, so now that we set the record straight, we kind of give you some expectations. Let me tell you about these TVs. And since we have 4 TVs here, I want to take my time with each TV and tell you about the pros and the cons of each TV to kind of give you a real good idea of what the TVs are actually good at, because that is going to give you a better understanding of each of the TVs. I'm probably going to leave out some of the basic stuff, but if you have any questions at all, leave them in the comments. And for the most part, I'm going to leave out sound as well, because it's no doubt about it, the Panasonic Z95B is just way better than the rest of the TVs in terms of inbuilt sound. And later on in the video, I will do scene by scene analysis, but for now, we're just going to have things running in the background while I break down the pros and the cons of each TV one by one. The first one that you see is going to be the Bravia 8 Mark II. This is the TV from Sony. It's a QD OLED using Samsung Display's latest QD OLED panel. And yeah, this is an awesome TV. It's the successor to the A95L, which won TV of the Year 2 years in a row from the Value Electronics Shootout. I would say the pros to this TV is that it does look like the true successor to the A95L. It's brighter and it's more impactful than the A95L. It packs a punch with its processing as well. It feels like the processing is on another level. So another pro for me with the Sony is going to be that it really performs better than it measures. And the way that I mean that is that you'll see that on measurements, it's not going to be as bright as the other TVs. I think the always-on dynamic tone mapping definitely helps the Sony perceive the brightness when it comes down to looking at the TVs. Much like the Z95B does it, they have a very similar algorithm in the way that they behave in that respect. But I really do think that the Sony is a very impactful, nice HDR TV that you really are going to be impressed with if you have this TV. As far as the cons for me on the Bravia 8 Mark II, definitely, not being able to have 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, having the only 2 HDMI 2.1 ports capable of 120 Hertz. That's a downside, but I'm not even going to really call that the big con here. The big con for me is going to be the HDR10 gradation. I think that looking at a few shots just kind of disappointed me in terms of just the overall smoothness of the gradients. There's posterization in a lot of scenes where last year or the year before that with the A95L, if you've ever looked at one, you wouldn't see those type of issues. And that's something that is a really unfortunate thing that I hope Sony fixes in the near future. The other thing is the Dolby Vision mode is very, very much unwatchable in some of the darker scenes. You're just going to get so much information that you shouldn't be able to see in those darker scenes. And it also still does have some of those posterization issues in Dolby Vision as well. And then finally, out of the box, my unit personally had a red push that definitely needs to be corrected. And after getting settings from Classy, this was a lot better. All right, that was the Bravia 8 Mark II. In full disclosure, Sony did send me this TV. However, the rest of the TVs you see in this demonstration, I did end up buying myself. So let's move on to the one that is next here, the Samsung S95F. This is a QD OLED as well, the latest generation from Samsung Display. And this TV is very bright in both HDR and SDR. It is insanely bright. But let's talk about the actual pros of this TV. For me, I like the skin tones a lot on this TV. It's going to be a pro for me. I think the skin tones on the S95F, for my unit at least, were really pleasing, and I didn't have an issue with them. So I would say, yeah, the Samsung is probably the best of the 4 out of the box. The HDR10 gradation on this TV was pretty good as well. Most of the time, it looked like the best TV of the 4 when it was trying to display the gradients. But there is going to be an exception to that where it's like, it's good, but it still does have some posterization. I did notice, and I didn't notice that on last year's S95D. So I do think it's kind of taken a step back with the gradation a little bit, but that's more so in game mode than anything else. I think in HDR10, it was pretty clean for the most part, and it was the cleanest of the 4 TVs. Shadow detail was also a pro for me. I really think that shadow detail out of the box looked really good on the Samsung. It may be a slight bit lifted, but I do prefer a little bit more shadow detail than crushing, so that's just a personal preference thing, and that's kind of my pros and the cons. It's going to be more of the personal preferences for myself personally, and if you kind of vibe with that, then maybe you can take those pros and cons and apply that to your own. Another pro for the Samsung has to be the 165 Hz VRR support. It's really awesome that they did this for PC gamers. I don't have much else to say about it other than it's an awesome feature. The last thing I want to say about this TV in terms of pros is going to be Game Motion Plus. Please, other TV manufacturers, this is going to keep being a pro for Samsung as long as you don't have it. This is the only company that delivers motion interpolation for gaming at a low latency. So I absolutely think that this should be added to every TV. Now for the cons of the TV. Well, I have to put the screen coating in this category because even though I like it, I think it's good for my personal usage. It could be a pro, it could be a con. I'm listing it in the cons because I have a vocal minority out there that is very vocal, that is saying that this is a bad thing. So I do think it is the minority of people, and I think the majority of people actually do like this on the TV, and it's probably why it's going to continue to be on the TVs for years and years to come. But I could be wrong, and Samsung removes it next year. I don't know. Maybe it's just not fair to put this as a con. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to the real cons of the TV. Another con for me is going to be the inconsistencies of the actual processor in the TV itself. The image processing for the TV most of the time looks really great, and it's going to look very similar to the Sony in a lot of cases, right? Like there's going to be times where I couldn't tell them apart. But there is also going to be times where the Samsung is doing too much, I guess I could say, and you could see it's sort of smudging away fine details. It's like they're smoothing out the picture instead of doing something else to enhance it. So this little smoothing thing that they're doing with the TV, which I think is another reason why we're seeing smoother gradients with the TV, by the way, I think this is something that is always on applied to get the gradation to look the way it does. And the downsides is sometimes it scrubs away the fine detail, much like if you put the Sony on smooth gradation for like high, for example, or medium, for example. This isn't something new. This has definitely been around on Samsung TVs for a very long time. It's just one of the downsides to their processing techniques. And I do think that this processor is upgraded as a whole because, like I said, at times it looks very similar to the Sony and you can't really tell them apart sometimes. For the next con, we have to talk about the color bug. The color bug is going to be present in some content. It's really just going to be dependent on what you're watching, though. It does feel like higher graded content, the brightness is more affected with the color. And if you are going to end up calibrating your TV or you're going to end up changing the EOTF in any type of way, it's going to be more impactful. You're going to see this color bug more often. And this is going to be something that you would notice if you go that route. If you don't and you're out of the box, chances are you're probably not going to see it unless it's next to another TV. But it is something that is there, it's present, and that's the disappointing thing about it is the color could be better on this TV. And seeing some examples with all four next to each other, there's times where the color brightness of the Samsung is still the brightest of all of them, and that's with this bug. So this bug doesn't seem to hit as hard as I expected it to hit, but it is there. And before I go on to the last con, I think this is the most unfortunate thing, is like this TV probably could end up being the best TV of the year if it didn't have these problems. It is that good, but these downsides really take it down a notch, and especially this next downside. And well, they removed HDIG, and they did what now? Come on, you can't be doing stuff like this mid-cycle of the TV. It's just an odd thing, and I don't care if it's a mistake. It's just something we shouldn't have to worry about. So if it wasn't for that, I really think that the Samsung would be the best gaming TV, hands down, not even no doubt about it. Like nothing would even change my mind on that. But there was a TV that sort of got there. And if this HDIG thing sticks, it's gonna be this TV here. The Panasonic Z95B is a gaming monster. Putting this TV into the true game mode and playing games on it is an absolute treat. There's times where I was switching between Filmmaker mode and game mode and it looked exactly the same. The only downside, may be that there's a little bit more posterization, but I'm not exactly sure on that. I have to do more testing on that. And before I get comments saying I don't want my game mode to look like Filmmaker mode, don't worry, Panasonic's got you covered with their regular game mode. It's going to be very much out of the box, just like the Samsung and the LG, where it's all over the place with its settings, kind of cranking up the contrast and the color. Maybe that's what you want out of your picture. There's an option. Okay, so no doubt about it, the game mode is definitely one of the pros. Let's move on to the other pros of this TV. I got to talk about the HDR capability of this TV, the HDR impact of this TV. It's like the Sony pretty much, but has a little bit more depth due to the panel, and it also has a bit more brightness to it. I mean, not just a bit more brightness, it has a lot more brightness at times. When I first saw it for the first time, I was like, this is crazy. Is this right? Is this correct? It was really mind-blowing. But yeah, this is an amazing looking TV in terms of brightness and impact. I think that this is probably my favorite in terms of HDR impact of all the TVs. The next thing I want to talk about for a pro for the Panasonic is going to be the depth. This TV has a lot of depth to it, and I do think a lot of it is related to the panel, and I'll talk about that a little bit more once we get to the LG G5. But this TV definitely feels like the best TV depth I've seen from any TV. It reminds me of the LG G4 last year, but overall a much cleaner approach than what LG takes with their TVs. I would say they're very similar to Sony. We have already talked about how they're similar to Sony in their dynamic tone mapping approach, but yeah, I do think their processing approach is very similar as well, as you don't see things getting over sharpened or overzealous with this TV at all in terms of the picture processing. It doesn't feel like it's taking it up too much, but there is some amount of something going on with the panel itself that I do think that Panasonic has nothing to do with. Another pro I would say is the flexibility of the HDR modes that you get. If you want to have it act like the Sony, you can absolutely have it act like the Sony. And if you want to have it where it's clipping at 2000, you can have it clipping at 2000 nits. If you want to have it clipping at 1000 nits, you can have it clipping at 1000 nits. So it's so much flexibility, and there's a lot to go into HDR with this TV. I love it for HDR. I think that this is probably going to end up being my new monitor for grading. Another pro for me is going to be the design. I gotta say, I love this design. Now put away your pitchforks. I understand that a lot of people don't like this design, but I like it. I think it's really nice. It reminds me of the older TVs from back in the day that they just have a style to it. You know, it feels like a premium TV, and it even swivels. Which TV swivels? I mean, I'm just saying, like, this is such a cool design. Definitely 2 thumbs up here. All right, moving on to the cons of the Panasonic. There's not very many cons, but this is one of them, and that is going to be in Dolby Vision. There's a lot of posterization, and you've heard me say this word a couple of times now, posterization. If you're not familiar with what this is, it's pretty much going to be color banding most of the time when you see it, and you are going to notice that when you're looking at gradients, it just gets broken up. In the majority of the scenes, it did appear on the lower light scenes, but the issue can creep up in any type of scene, really. I made this a con for the Sony, so I got to make it a con for the Panasonic. The Panasonic only has 2 HDMI 2.1 ports capable of 144 Hz VRR gaming. So yeah, if you knock the Sony, you got to knock the Panasonic in that respect. The other con for me is going to be the controller. I hate it. I don't like it. It's a Fire TV controller, and the actual Fire TV OS, I don't like it. I wish they did not use this Fire TV. It's probably the worst part about it. The other thing is, like, please, the menu button, I don't like it. It's not a backlit remote, so sometimes I have a hard time finding it, and it's sandwiched between 2 other buttons. It's a weird spot for the menu button. The last con for me is going to be the black crush. I do think that shadows are crushed a little bit on this TV. There is a way to fix that. There is a setting for that, so you can adjust it. So it's not a lost cause in that respect, but out of the box, that's what I'm evaluating, and it is going to be crushed a little bit, much like this next TV. Really quickly, let me interrupt what I'm talking about here to let you know that on the screen right now, you're going to see the demo being ran multiple times in different modes. So pay attention to the modes that I put it in. I'm going to write them on the screen, what mode it's going to be in, so that you can see the difference between each mode, and it's going to use the same demo. It's going to be running in the background while I continue to talk about the pros and the cons of each TV. I have a really good feeling about this TV that it's going to be a fan favorite because of some of the magical things it does. And I say it that way because it's just an interesting TV, the LG G5 OLED. Like the Panasonic, it uses the primary RGB tandem OLED, and like the Panasonic, it has a very distinct look to it where it has depth, man. This TV has depth. And yeah, it's going to probably be enhanced by the fact that there's a huge amount of sharpening going on for this TV. Just don't know where it all came from, but it is definitely happening, and sometimes it can bring out some nasty things, but I think a lot of people are going to like it because it also does have the effect of creating this just insane amount of, dare I say it, pop. Yep, I said it. It has this picture pop to it that is going to really blow a lot of people's mind, especially if you're going to tinker around with the other modes. The G5 is pushing everything to the max. Sharpness, brightness, and the filmmaker mode looks pretty good for the most part, but there's still a lot of sharpness to it. And when you put it into other modes, whoo, that is when you go to crazy town. You could really modify the picture on the LG to kind of bring out some of the biggest flare that you can get out of your TV. And there's the detail enhancer, there's the brightness enhancer. I think that's what they're called, but they do different things respectively. And if you have Cinema Home on, you can really get a bright experience out of your HDR. And I think a lot of people are going to like the LG for that way. And it was really the same with the G4 and really similar with the G3 as well. This is not as clean as the G4 though. I do want to stress that. Okay, so you kind of understand what the TV is all about. Let's go into the pros and the cons. The first pro is going to be the brightness. Wow. Yeah, I kind of spoke about it a little bit, but the brightness is just like the Panasonic in a lot of ways. But I do think the Panasonic is slightly brighter in that kind of bigger window. But man, the smaller windows, I think the G5 is probably going to be brighter. The other thing is the depth. The depth of this TV looks three-dimensional. I'll say it. I'll go ahead and say it. I'll say it looks three-dimensional. It has that look to it. Panasonic has that look to it as well. This is the panel. It has to be. What else could it be? I'm looking at the QD OLEDs next to these two panels. The QD OLEDs do not look like these panels. What is it then? What's the difference? Is it just the way they're set up out of the factory? Could be. Could it be the amount of black crush that they have out of the box that's added to this depth? Could be. That's definitely possible. The truth is, I have no idea why it looks the way it does. It just has a different dimension to it. And it's not the sharpness, because the Panasonic looks like this too. The sharpness, if anything, kind of takes away from the effect sometimes, and the Z95B just looks like the better TV. If they tone down the sharpness a little bit, this is definitely going to be up there. There's some other issues with low luminance as well that I'm going to talk about, but man, this is a great TV. The next pro is going to be the package. You get a really good package deal with the LG G5, and that's because you get the 5-year panel warranty and you get a mount in the box. That's pretty cool. I think a mount in the box is going to be a nice thing for a lot of people because a lot of people mount their TVs. The downside to that is there is going to be people that want to put this on a stand and they have to buy a separate TV stand for this. However, in some regions, they do offer options with the stand in the box, but here in the US, there is not an option like this year, like there was last year. A pro for this TV is going to be 165 Hz VRR gaming. Not a lot of TVs have this. Only this and the Samsung have it. So yeah, it's a pro. I don't have nothing else to say about it other than cool. All right, so now for the cons. When you're looking at the LG G5, there is definitely something that sticks out like a sore thumb, and that is going to be over processing. I know. How much processing is too much? Yeah, LG found it. They found that limit. There's definitely times where you get some things brought out of the picture that you really wish didn't get brought out. A lot of people said in the past, LG really made film grain apparent. They made it stick out more than any other TV brand. Whew, this year, it's definitely true. You can see more film grain than ever before. If you're a fan of film grain, you've got film grain here. You've got a lot of it. If you're not a fan of it, then you're going to be really disappointed with this TV because it brings it out way more. Other things you'll notice if you sit close enough to the TV is that there's this dithering that pops out a little bit more. And some other TVs can have dithering too. I've seen it on other TVs, but this is very noticeable if you're closer to the TV. Maybe if you're at monitor distance, this is going to be something that bothers you. You can see it. So if you're thinking about getting a 77-inch and you're going to sit close to the TV, or an 83-inch and you're going to sit a little bit closer to the TV, I might think twice about that one with the LG G5 in mind and probably go with the LG G4 instead and just take a little bit less brightness if you're going the LG route. That's just my take on it right now. I think that if I'm buying an 83-inch TV, it's either going to be the G4 or the S95F. That's probably where I would go with it. All right, another con for me is going to be the shadow detail. I don't know what's going on with the shadow detail for the LG because on Spears and Munsell low dynamic range pattern, it seems like it's fine. The Panasonic at least shows that it's crushed, but the LG does not show that it's crushed. And instead, in content, it still looks crushed. And if you raise the near black detail slider that they added with the patch, if you raise the near black slider, you can actually add saturation to faces sometimes. I'd probably chalk this one up as a bug, but I just wanted to mention it in case anybody was wondering if they've seen this on their own TV. All right, now let's go into the next con. I don't like the controller. Yeah, that's another Panasonic situation for me. I think that you're looking at the controller and you're like, they're supposed to make this better. Somehow it got worse. I think Fire TV OS is worse, but at least the navigation for the Panasonic feels good in the menus, where the LG does not feel good for the navigation in the menus. Another con for me with the LG is going to be the game mode image quality. You're going to get posterization, a lot of it, with the game mode on the LG. And like I said, Panasonic has some of this as well, but it seems like it's more often on the LG. And it is going to probably be the worst of the four on game mode for their image quality. It does feel like if you just go into another mode, the image quality is better. The brightness, though, and the actual color brightness isn't seemingly too affected with the change. So it's not like the C5 in that area where the C5 is absolutely just a downgrade when you go into game mode. But it is the worst looking game mode of the four in terms of the image quality that you're getting. Those of you that are still with me, I know this is like one of the longest videos ever done, but I do think that talking about the TVs at length is worth it, and it is something that is going to be helpful for the people that are watching. But I think for the people that are watching, maybe a lot of you guys are waiting for the scene-by-scene analysis, so let's get into that. We'll kind of go through a few examples right here, and then we'll end the video. Let's start off first with this scene from The Matrix. You can see that all four TVs are going to be on display here. I've arranged it so that you can see the brightness of each TV according to the scopes. So this is the light output that my camera is capturing. And you can see that the Panasonic is going to be the brightest right here, followed by the LG G5, followed by the Samsung S95F, and followed by the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II. I do want to say that on this scene, it was so bright on the Panasonic and the G5, it really stuck out. But also the film grain was more pronounced on the LG here, and some of the other noise that was in the picture is pronounced as well for the LG more than the other TVs. And the Panasonic wasn't too far behind in that respect. So I wonder if there's anything going on with the panel itself. I'm not sure, but it isn't the first time I've seen something like this, so it's something to note. This next scene is going to be the guitar flame scene from Mad Max. This is a very iconic scene. So let's move to the next scene, also from Mad Max, with this in respect. And now you can see the QD OLED is even further ahead on these, but it's not far behind on the G5 and the Z95. But still, you do see that the QD OLEDs are still maintaining the higher color brightness with these scenes in mind. I'm going to show you some more scenes from Mad Max. I do think it's pretty crazy how they were trading blows throughout the movie. And as I go through them, you can see just how close they all really are. I'm going to get into some Stranger Things here, and we're going to look at this first scene. You can see shadow detail differences for all the TVs. This one's interesting because there is a lens flare in it, and I'm not seeing it on the LG. So these are just some examples that I wanted to pull, and maybe in a future video, we'll see more examples. I have hours and hours of footage. When I said I put a lot of time into this, I put a lot of time into this. And I want to leave you with this. If you're buying any of these four TVs, you really can't go wrong. And as you heard, there's cons for these TVs, and it may pertain to your use case and what you want to do with the TV. I know you guys want to hear my picks, so I do have individual picks for you. If you want the best overall TV with picture, sound, everything included, it's going to be the Panasonic Z95B. I do think that it's a good complete package. If you just want something for movies and movies only, it's going to be the Bravia 8 Mark II. I think this is going to be my favorite movie watching TV of the year. And in terms of gaming, I would go with the Panasonic Z95B unless the Samsung is fixed up. If the Samsung's fixed up and is working as intended, then we're going to talk about going with the Samsung for gaming for sure. If you're PC gaming, then maybe you want to look at the LG G5 because it's probably going to have less problems than the Samsung with PC gaming, and the Panasonic doesn't get to 165 Hz. So I would probably go that route if I was a PC gamer and I was looking for a TV. Again, though, they're all great, and I just want to hear what your opinion is. What do you guys think? What's the best TV to you, and did your mind change at all with this comparison? Tell me in the comment section below. If you guys are buying any of these TVs, don't forget to use the affiliate links in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.